Welcome to one of our very fun series that we do for the Eastern Service Center Initiatives team, and we're glad to see everybody here. Very packed house. Thank you so much. We all know why we're here today. I just want to introduce Rob Mason, who is the Surge King, and Jeff Lelliott, right over here, the Ultimate Surge King. And they're going to give us a great briefing, so enjoy, and we would love your feedback afterwards, so thank you.
So I'm Rob Mason. I've been here at the Service Center since '07. In '08, Western Service Center developed a concept called the Situation Room for the Service Center. It was dreamed out to be the place where a group of people could come to work intensely on a significant incident. Out west, it tended to be fires. Fires were the big thing out there. Also, they had storms out in the Pacific that they had to deal with. But this was going to be.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't understand that. But anyway, so the concept was that there were so many people at headquarters and various offices that wanted information that they were calling our ATC facilities to get the same information over and over again. And oh, by the way, the facility was dealing with the problem on top of having to answer all these questions. So the concept was that the Situation Room would be that place where that information would come, and it'd be a one-stop shop for all the headquarters need-to-knows, as well as our directors of operation. That was the concept. So over the course of a few years, we built out situation rooms in each of the 3 service centers, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But what happened in the intervening time was and I'm going to say this the first time here, it's not going to be the last time you hear it. Words matter. Terms matter. And so the concept of the situation room operation got lost in the physical situation room. And those things kind of got meshed. So even though we're going to talk about the situation room today, what we're actually going to start with is the operation. The operation is done by the Significant Incident Response Group. That's where we start, because the room is just a room. This is the group that does the work, and we're going to start talking about that first. Jeff. One more. So, the mission. We're going to work for the service area directors, and we're also going to take weight off of our facilities in the field who are dealing with the event. Go ahead. We're going to add value. If we're not adding value, we don't need to be. We don't need to be expending the resources, wasting our time, or wasting the time somebody has to read what we put out. We've got to add value. And who is making this up? It's primarily from the operations support group, primarily the tactical team. But it's not just that. We bring in the other aspects of the ATO, particularly tech ops, because almost any time we're dealing with something, it has a tech ops piece. Our tech ops point of contact is Hurricane Alan Stinson. I don't know if some of you know Hurricane Alan. Hurricane Alan has been a friend of mine from the day we first met. And we started trying to figure out how each other thought, because we think differently. I'm from an air traffic background. He's from a tech ops background. Remember I said words matter? I would say we need to get our facility up. And his idea of a facility was any little structure that was out there on the airfield, like an ILS box. That's a facility for him. No. I'm talking about the tower. I'm talking about the trade. I'm talking. Words matter. Keep coming back. Okay. There are three things about any event. They're never going to be the same. No two are exactly the same, and we won't treat them the same. As our leaders change, so will the requirements. And as our equipment change, the expectations for those things we deliver changes. Okay? The service center has our surge. We work for the directors. We can work virtually anywhere, or we can work in the situation room if we need those tools. We feed information to the regional administrators of all three regions that we overlie. The national version of the surge is from SysOp Security. They have the responsibility to directly communicate with the headquarters leadership. And their version of the situation room is called AirMac. You're going to see that term later also. Now, as I go through all this, I will throw out terms and things that I've lived them so long I might assume you understand. If I say something that doesn't make sense or you want a question, just let me know, because it is free form here, okay? And when Jeff gets up here, he wants even more of that, so really give it to Jeff. Anyway, so our service center personnel, when we stand up the surge, we have various levels of personnel. The incident manager, IM. If any of you have worked with any of the FEMA response organizations, the IM, incident manager, and some of these other terms are taken from those FEMA documents. So, incident manager is a manager, has overall responsibility, and determines our level of response. We're going to talk about level of response a little bit later, but here's who first decides how we're going to respond. The senior watch officer would be somebody like Jeff or me, someone who is a designee by the manager. It could be the manager. We provide support to our manager. We can start the operation virtually while there's a group of people racing to the situation room if we need to elevate to that level. We can operate virtually indefinitely. Or we can be the managers of the situation room, almost like if you're out of an ATC facility, like a CIC, a controller in charge. So that's what the senior watch officer is, and the watch officer would be everyone else who needs to come into the situation room to fill out the staffing needs to get the job done. When the job gets too broad for one person or two people, we need to bring in watch officers. Those watch officers are going to have different responsibilities. They may be administrative in nature. It's going to depend upon background, knowledge, skills. So everybody coming in doesn't have to have the same background. But we don't want to put someone into a responsible position that has no deep understanding. So, for instance, if you're answering the phone in the situation room and somebody calls up and says, "Is Airport ABC open? We just had a hurricane come through there. We need to know, is ABC open?" You've got to understand that that's not a good question. You've got to understand, what are you really asking? Is the airport itself open? Are there air traffic control facilities serving it open? And who is the responsible party that can answer those questions authoritatively? You can't make it up. We cannot make up an answer in there. If we don't know, we have to go to an authoritative source. Okay, so moving on. Surge activation. We can be activated in one of three levels. Level 3, virtual. We are sitting at home on a Friday afternoon before having adult beverages, and somebody calls up and says, there's a storm coming. Let's set up the situation room or the surge virtually, and we'll start putting out spot reports here every 6-8 hours, whatever. Jeff and I can do that. We've been given the tools that we can create that virtual surge wherever we are, and it's a good thing. It's saved money. It's saved time. It is an operation that is, to me, it's a whole lot better to activate at the lowest possible level because you keep down confusion. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Level 2, short-term occupation of the situation room. We've seen that several times over the course of the winter. Early on, when we had some really severe winter weather up east, we activated the situation room. Limited. Eventually we got to where we were handling those virtually. We had a situation where Washington Center went ATC alert. It was reported out initially as ATC 0, but it was ATC alert. It had to do with ERAM. We stood up the situation room because we didn't know how deep that was going to go and how long it was going to last. So there are times when we'll activate at level 2 with the understanding that we may stand down pretty quick. When we start activating level 2, we begin by activating level 3. Somebody's at home starting that operation, calling the facilities, getting the information while people are running to the situation room. And then level 1, full activation. That's going to be a long-term situation. This is the graphic of it. We have never in 8 years run 24/7. We have run 18 or 19 hours a day, but we have to be capable of and willing to run 24/7. There's very little that can be done in the middle of the night. Tech Ops is not going to go out there and restore equipment once the sun goes down in a disaster area. So there's very little value added in the middle of the night, but we have to be able to do that, and we would do that in a level 1 activation. So our deliverables, we do spot reports. Spot reports are not situation reports; they are more narrow. We don't report on everything about the NAS. That's a situation report. We are going to give them the ATO perspective. And then you have to be careful about where you get your information and who's reporting. We have to go to the command center to get those things that are having to do with the tactical operations going on in the NAS. What's Delta going to be doing in the morning? Are they going to be flying? That information is at the command center through one of their ancillary parts called A4A. So we have to leverage connectivity in order to get this.
Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
where's the command center? Who stands it up? Who is it? What is it?
The Air Traffic Control System Command Center Herndon. Warrenton, sorry.
The one with the big screen, Star Wars screens all over? Is that the one?
Yes.
Outside of Dulles? Okay.
Yeah, and they're there all the time. They're not stood up and stood down. They're there all the time.
Okay.
Okay, so we coordinate with the regional crisis response working groups. All three regional administrators have us on speed dial, I think. Tried to establish very good working relationships with the Eastern and New England administrators. We have a wonderful working relationship here at the Southern region, and always have. It is not something we take for granted, and it's not something that every service center enjoys. We're different that way. One of the things we have to do is answer inane questions. Oh, did I say that? We have to answer questions. And some of them are bizarre. 11 o'clock one night, what's the fuel usage for the New York metropolitan airports areas for tech ops and air traffic per day? We need this by 3 in the morning. So there are some oddball things that come through. You may not know the answer. I promise you I did not even know where to begin, other than I knew I'd call Alan Stinson and he'd figure this out. So, oddball stuff. Other services for the directors of operation. We are their staff. The directors of air traffic operations are who we are matrixed to. So if they need us to do something, by God, we're going to do it. There's something else that's not up there. Remember I said that Surge National is run by SysOp Security. In an odd way, we get matrixed to them also. So if something happens and they decide that they need to stand up the surge operation at the service center, we sort of have to answer to them too. So it's an odd working relationship. Anyway, I think that's the end. Yeah, questions? Deb?
So I got 3 questions, Rob. The first one is, so let's say you have a big thunderstorm, tornadoes in Alabama, it's coming our way. How does the IM, or whoever the IM is, how does that information get here? Who gets it? Who stands up? The search team?
So you've got to understand that certain things are daily in the NAS. Thunderstorms are daily in the NAS. Where it becomes a high level of risk would be if we were anticipating something that was potentially very disruptive coming. Tornadoes tend to be a narrow swath, okay? We have had a tornado come through parts of Alabama.
Another one.
Huh?
Well, maybe that was a bad example. Let's say
Wait,
like hurricanes.
Hurricanes coming.
Yeah,
Hurricanes coming. We're watching those from the time they come off the coast in Africa. And so by the time it gets to mid-ocean, we are already planning how we're going to bring our facilities up in readiness, prepare the area. And so we and Hurricane Allen, are already communicating that to the IMs, to the directors. There's already a visibility there, long before it actually hits. The things that we can't foresee, earthquakes, you know, those are the anomalies. The things we can see in advance, yeah, we're looking out days,
So
if not
before
weeks.
you go virtual and before you indulge in many adult beverages.
Mhm.
You already know if something's coming and it's a possibility, right? Or is there a team on standby or something?
That's a good question. The IM is always on call. And the ROC has a list of two others that are on call. So that's how that would, if something jumped up, that's how that would
Okay, so you
happen.
already know.
Yeah.
And for my last question, I know you guys work other stuff other than storms, right? Presidential movements, things like that.
So this is where Central and Western and Eastern sort of diverge a little bit. The surge operation in Eastern does not take into account TFR's, directly, TFR's VIP movement. That's a different part of the tactical team. With Western, their surge people do that. So there's a divergence there. Okay. Any other questions?
And you said Western, theirs were fires and storms. What is Eastern, the typical, well, you say it's not all the same, but the preponderance of surge operations include?
Hurricanes, of course.
Okay,
We've done winter storms.
okay,
We've done, like I said, the ERAM outage at Washington Center.
okay.
Earthquake, when the earthquake hit up west of DC and everybody jumped out of the buildings. And there were some things that came out of that with Allen, so that their response will be better next time. Yes.
So typically, like that incident that happened in Central, was it up in Minnesota, where there was a sabotage a few years ago to equipment, that would probably stand up the surge.
The Chicago Center fire, yes,
Okay.
yes. They were stood up. In fact, I got the call before they even stood up. I already saw it and had been apprised of it, and I called them and I said, you might want to be looking at this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
When you do stand up, how do you get word out that you are standing up?
There's a situation room mailbox, an email account, and we have a list of emails, addresses, a blast email. And so that would be the first thing that goes out is we're standing up in response to whatever event, and we're standing up either virtually or if we're in the situation room. One of the things that we always do in the situation room physically is we open up the standing bridge. We have 2 bridges up there that are always available, and I think they're going to become more and more used in the operation. But that's the first thing we always do, and that goes out with that initial email blast. Yeah.
Where is the situation?
Do you know where the ROC is on the 5th floor? If you're walking down the hall and the ROC entrance is on your right, the very next door is the situation room. Yes.
I know in the past, several of us, I
Right.
worked with you before,
Yeah.
actually, that. How do you become involved again to be on that blast list? Because I hadn't seen emails go out, probably because you changed the system,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah. And because we really haven't had any, we've not had a hurricane.
Let's not go
Not a
there.
So before we get to the third being the charm, yeah, that's why I'm retiring before hurricane season starts. So anyway, and he's going to have it.
And I was going to ask you about Hurricane Sandy, because that's something you mentioned that, because at that time, I think you guys were open for quite
Yeah.
some time
Yeah.
because of the devastation.
Right.
And you were asking for volunteers
Nice.
Right.
to try to see if you
Right.
can help them.
Yep. Yep. We had Lake
That was a lot
LaGuardia.
of that, too. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's exciting, it's fun, and he's going to talk about the situation room and the operation in the airport.
All right.
Kind of curious, trying to get an idea of who I'm actually talking to here in terms of your backgrounds. Tech ops folks, how many do we have here? Okay. How many management services folks? FISDO, business services. Okay. What am I missing? Quality control, QCG. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of hands not going up.
PRG.
PRG, okay. PRG. Okay. You guys, John Luke, we work with him very closely. Great guy. One of the things we've not really talked about, and forgive me on this, is probably going to be covered a little bit in this as well. There's so much that we do in terms of when we're talking before an event and what's leading up to an event. We'll start, we covered the activations and everything else in part two, right?
We did the activation.
I'm sorry, in terms of the,
No, we
want to Alpha Bravo Charlie?
No.
Okay. So some of the stuff, what we do is that we deal a lot dealing with outside of the ATO. We work ATO specific stuff here. Air traffic organization, that is what the surge, the situation room covers. But we work with our outside counterparts through the crisis response working groups, which are set up by the region. John Lukasiewicz is the head of the CRWG for us. He's the designated lead for that. We are the ATO component that works with him. Inside of that, we've got all the other FAA lines of business that are there as well, and plus we have the interaction which even goes outside of the FAA, which is there. So we deal a lot with them, particularly in terms of storms. For instance, we were saying earlier, Deb, you were asking about if we have a storm which is building off the coast of Africa. You're asking also in general what we're actually looking at. We're constantly looking at the news, but when it starts getting into hurricane season, one of the first things we're doing when we come into the office in the morning, we're pulling up weather on the ground. We're pulling up all of the aviation sites and the weather sites, and we're looking, okay, where are the tracks of the storms coming? Because we need to start looking way out, because our first FAA facilities that are going to be impacted, Puerto Rico, St. Croix, St. Thomas, we're already starting to look at those facilities, and they get, every single year, they get something, whether it's tropical storm, whether they get some sort of a minor hurricane impact, they're going to get something. So we're already starting to get a little bit stirred up even at that point in terms of getting our response levels up. We work very closely with the CRWG in actually working on the response levels of readiness levels, I should say, not response levels. I'm thinking something completely different. Readiness levels in terms of when a storm is coming. B is basically, B on the tech ops side, they're constantly at that down in the Caribbean. In other words, they're already at a steady state where they're prepared for something coming along. C is during an event. Charlie's during an event. When you start getting to Delta, that's post-event. And the FAA facilities, we basically norm out on the air traffic side. We will ramp up to Bravo, and then we'll get to Charlie during an event. There's money aspects involved when they start doing this. There's accountability. All of this is when it starts ramping back into the situation room, quote unquote, or the surge activities, what we have. The last few scenarios we've had, Rob and I pretty much, we worked a winter storm just virtually in January, where it was just him and I. We just tag teamed an event for 3 days with a blizzard up in the Northeast. Other stuff, it's, as I said, it's much more involved with Hurricane Sandy. I was on detail with SysOps at the time, but we got very involved in the post-event there because of all the damage that had been done up in New York. This is where we start relying on the other lines of business as well. PNR, we touch you guys a lot during these type of events. We start dealing with flight procedures, guys. I mean, this is where we need your expertise, that we're going to be reaching out, we're going to be touching on your expertise to be able to respond. We are very good at the pre-event, and we're very good at the post-event when we're working these storms. During the events as well as what we're talking about when we're dealing with the spot reps and all that, we rely a lot on the tech ops folks to be able to give us any information, and we rely a lot on the Air Traffic Control Systems Command Center, and which you were referring to earlier, which is in Warrenton. Once again, the ATC, SEC, otherwise known as the Command Center, is the operational facility. It's run by System Operations. They have 51% of the vote of what goes on in the operation in the country. So they make the final determination on the overall ops in the country. So we rely on them to tell us what's going on, because they have very good lines of communication with the facilities, and they also had the NOCC, which is the National Operations Center for Tech Ops, sits in the same building with them side by side. So we rely a lot on them in terms of the actual event. We're actually in the process of changing the way we respond nationally to these events to include more of the command center operations and the NOCC as well during an event to get good information. One of our primary responsibilities in what we do is information gathering and then information dissemination on the other side. And once again, we need to be able to make it as clear, as accurate as possible. So we need to be able to trust our sources. We need to be able to have a common information stream. One of the things that happened, as Rob explained earlier, the concept of when we stood up these situation rooms back in '07 when Western started it and Eastern and Central followed, was that there would be a common source of information that everybody would go into into the situation room or to search. It wasn't known as that back then, but that would be where it all started and will all flowed into, and from there we disseminate out to whom we went to. Reality is that does not occur. You still have your alternate lines of communication to go around, and everybody's reporting on this stream. You've got one organization reporting on this stream, and this is why we're actually trying to simplify a little bit of the process right now with what's going on nationally to be able to clean up some of our information sources and reporting streams. But it's caused problems in the past. You may be reporting out on the same piece of information from the situation room here. The facility's reporting up through their lines of business over here, and then you got Tech Ops reporting out of the same line of business over here, and by the time it gets up to this common point at the top, you got 3 different pieces of information. And it was all the same information, but it came from different sources. The language was different, facility to facility, all sorts of things like that. We got to be very careful in what we do. So a lot of the time, we just sit there and we scratch our heads saying, okay, what exactly do they need, and what exactly should we be doing? So we're gonna, sorry.
Doesn't a command center control that flow of information to the official response to outside the agency?
The command center is an operational air traffic control facility, and that's it.
Okay.
So they do, you're right, in the terms that they do have a line of reporting stream which goes out. And this was also one of the other reporting streams that was going out because they're reporting through their lines of business, while the command center is reporting up to Terry Bristol and Randy Park and all the ones up there. So they're reporting their stuff, we're reporting our stuff, facilities are reporting through the directors up through their chain of command.
Right.
And this is where we're starting to get in trouble.
Right.
So, yes, so what we're
It
doing is we're
appears
trying to look
that-
at it now, well, who has the best communication structure? Well, to the facilities, air traffic wise, it is the command center. I mean, we have good lines of communication here, but what we're doing now, we just got to make sure that our lines of communication are clear to our customers. Our primary customer here is the directors.
Okay.
So that's where we're looking at it.
So
We work very well with national as
The
well.
typical scenario, if you have a storm coming in, like a air traffic side of the house, they probably are talking about rerouting procedures. They don't know the damage yet until the thing passes through.
Yep.
So it initially starts with rerouting traffic, then depending on damage.
So you're dealing with traffic management perspectives there, and the actual day-to-day operation for traffic management, all that will go directly through the facilities.
And on the tech ops side of the house, they'll say if we lose these facilities for, like, say, flight procedures, how, if we lost this, would this be, is that all pre-canned at this point?
Some of it's pre-canned,
Okay.
but a lot of it is going to be just done very tactically and dynamically, depending on the situation.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right, let's run through here and see what we've got. I have looked at this. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to quick look at it this morning. Okay, you were asking earlier, where is the situation room? Once again, it's upstairs. You keep clicking on through, Rob. Upstairs, once again, if you go out the elevators and if you go down towards where the lawyer's office is down and where the rock is, next door on the right-hand side, controlled access. Once again, we're dealing a secure environment right next door to the rock. We rely very heavily on the rock in terms of communication back and forth between the facilities. There are already set procedures in place on steady state operations of the way we typically work in the NAS, right now, if a situation occurs inside of the facility, they get broken pieces of equipment, etc., it is all reported up through the ROC, the Regional Operations Center, and is disseminated through their normal lines of communication there. When we get to a point that you need something more than just the normal lines of communication, that's where we come in. We touched on that in this last piece, where we now become a point where we need to have more staffing in, because we're getting so much information which is coming in that we need to flow that in so we can actually look through it and see what's relevant and what's not. That's where we become a piece of it as well in terms of the normal operations. We also rely very heavily on the ROC to be able to get some information, and when we're relying on communications back and forth between the facilities as well. We try and stay out of the day-to-day air traffic operational bit. And the reason being is, once again, there's already the command center, which is a piece of that. We do rely very heavily on talking back and forth with the command center to find out what's going on. Okay, 3 centers, all completed. Rob's already touched on that. Redundancy, supplemental help, we help each other out. If you look at a hurricane which is going to be coming up through the Gulf of Mexico and it's pointed right at New Orleans, like Hurricane Katrina, there was 2 centers, service centers involved in that whole operation there. You had the east and you had the central. And in today's operation, we would have both of these situations. Rooms would be open, we'd be helping each other out with that. We also had the ability to, if we needed to, we could stand up for central. Central could stand up for us. In reality, we could probably even do it for west. Once again, they look different. Core capabilities, as I said, you know, what it comes down to is what we really need is we need good points of communication. So usually it's a quick or close by with the Regional Operations Center if that's possible. The other thing we have is make sure we have access to good internet. We have access to, we got computer screens, we've got news information sources, we've got telephone communications and everything else. Once again, utilize multiple communication channels right there. Difficult to do in a virtual operation, and that's just for standing up the situation room itself. Rob touched on it earlier. When we stand up virtually, we're just out there. It's just maybe, we could actually do it where we had 2 of us. Rob and I, for a while during this last storm, both of us were working. He's working from his house in Conyers, I'm working from my house in Sharpsburg. And we were just working a situation, we're on the phone with each other saying, okay, you do this, and I'll do this, etc. And it finally got to the point that says, okay, everything's calmed down now, you can just handle it, and I'm taking a break for the next 6 to 8 hours. And we just kind of split it up. We worked shifts at that point, and worked out well. But at the same time, we carry phones and had our computers with us, and we could easily get right back into it if we needed to. Once again, I've already touched on this, use multiple monitors, computers, communication sources with the news. During the during the earthquake event that we had in Washington, D.C., we got more off of the news channels than we did off of our normal communications that day. BTC capability, if we needed to run some sort of video conference, all of that's there. Once again, Rob's already talked on the bridges, we'll move on. And this is just, you know, your common sources we've already touched on right there. The room itself belongs to the region. We use it. We put the equipment in there. There's one computer which is in the room which belongs to the region itself. But we borrow their room. They basically have given it to us to be able to use. We equip it. But if we need to use it, our operations will take precedence over anything else which is going on in there. Sometimes they schedule their own meetings, we'll kick them out. And we'll actually ask them politely, says, hey, we're going to come in here and use your room. We use it, please. And they're good with it. Once again, secure room, PID cards and everything else. Can you move on there, Rob? Yep, we already touched on this with some of the levels of the implementation earlier. Sometimes if we have an event, particularly if we have something, not a build-up, if we see a storm coming, we're already looking at it, says, okay, we can run it virtually until we hit this point. At this point here, we need to be in the room. We need to have everybody working in the situation room. But sometimes if we have something like an earthquake, we have an ATC 0 event at a large facility, we need to get in there or something pretty quickly. One person will take the lead and start getting things out, getting in the flick of what's going on. Virtually, they'll be in touch with the command center, they'll be in touch with the facility if it's appropriate, they'll be in touch with the tech ops folks if that's appropriate, to be able to be able to get a quick report out to the directors and let them know what's happening. At the same time, we may have some people that are physically on their way into the situation room. They can then open it up and get going from there. Surge begins the operation, so once again, you just start getting into it. And once again, we've already touched on that. You can move on. Challenges. This is why we try and keep just the amount of people inside of a situation room that we need for the event. We may have 2 people working inside of the room. We may have 4 or 5, depending on working in the room. We typically don't like more than about 4 or 5, just because it gets distracting because of all the other conversations which are taking place. It gets noisy. It's just too many people. So we try and just keep who we have in there. During the earthquake event, literally 25 people floated in that room. We were pushing people out, and it was just the way it was. It's everybody trying to help, and that's not what really works. We have some problems with the heating in there. Sometimes it gets a little hot. It's just the way that the room was constructed, so if we had more than just a few people in there at a time, it can get hot. If you decide to, and we're always looking for volunteers to work inside of the situation room with us during events. During the summertime, I would suggest you come in dressed as comfortably as possible, because it can get a little toasty in there at times. And we try and keep it cool, we try and keep it as fun as possible. Conflicting tasking, sometimes it's very difficult. As was said, we have different events are handled differently. Rob's already touched on it earlier. We have different leadership. Different leadership requires different things. We had, during this last storm, we saw something of what, which is completely new, with staffing reports for the facilities that the directors wanted. We'd never done that before. Sometimes when we get into employee accountability, sometimes when we got multiple, we got a Sandy situation where you got a large storm which is going up the East Coast. You've got 3 different regions involved, 3 open CRWGs. You've got the situation room which is open, and we're trying to provide spot reports. We've got telcons, and we're supposed to be meeting with each one of these CRWGs several times during the day, trying to keep them apprised of what's going on. So the senior watch officers or the incident managers are going to spend a good portion of their time off premises in meetings or on the phone in meetings. And this is when we're going to rely very heavily on the watch officers in the room to be able to get a lot of the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done. Problem solved, once again, got to think very much. We do a lot of stuff on the fly, a lot of thinking outside of the box. But at the same time, we can't really make it up. I mean, we got to be inside of the framework of the rules, and so sometimes it can get complex. And sometimes we'll do stuff, and we'll look back on it and says, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle it. Sometimes we do stuff that's now the MO of the way we're going to work throughout the country. So. There's goods and there's bads. I'll be very clear. Sometimes things work very well, sometimes they don't. You fix it and you move on. What's that?
Matching the people with their skills.
Yes, matching the people to their skills. Rob already touched on this earlier. Sometimes we're going to have the air traffic folks come in, and we may have very terminal-centric things that we're asking for, flight procedures. You guys are invaluable when it comes down to, I got pieces of equipment that are out, and I'm looking at it now, and I've got, it says, okay, what will work in terms of my approaches going into those facilities? What do I have? A lot of this we handle along with the command center. Command center's looking at this for their folks as well, talking directly with the facilities. But you guys can work out some invaluable help for us. PNR folks, you guys come in very handy on some of this as well, spectrumization, when we start losing that type of stuff. It's like, okay, we don't have at frequencies. Radars get blown over, that type of stuff. I mean, it's all of this type of stuff. It's matching, so if I had a dream crew, had somebody in there, and if I had a large scale event, I want somebody who's very good administratively. I want somebody who understands how employee accountability works inside the facilities. I want somebody who is very good from the flight procedures side. And I want somebody who thinks very good outside of the box traffic management side. And a lot of that with the ATC background as well. A few of us that are getting involved, Rob is leaving, as he said he's retiring inside of 20 days. I'm going to be taking over basically Rob's roles and responsibilities. Mac is working with us, Bruce is working with us. Between the three of us, we have something over about 50 to 60 years of traffic management experience in the facilities, which I think is a huge bonus when it comes to this. So it's good, and there's some very good people there, but that doesn't mean that's just our little piece of it. I've got my traffic management perspective. What I'm looking for now is everybody else to be able to fill that in. Just a room, and any questions you may have? Yes, sir.
Two parts, I guess. How is the military integrated with airbags for surge?
Yeah,
and are we better prepared for a terrorism event than we were in 9/11?
I would say yes. In many ways, we're better prepared for that. AJR2, which is SysOps security, and up at the airbag, up at headquarters, they basically handle the security side of the equation. Any sort of a terrorist attack in terms of what we're doing here, in terms of our surge activities, will be led from a national level. We have two different ways that we can do stuff here. We can work stuff on a national level, or we can work stuff that's just local. If we have something which is locally embedded inside of our service area, even as much as like a tropical storm, a large tropical storm, a hurricane, even which is kind of pointed at just a small portion of the coast, like it say Puerto Rico or something, it more likely would not become a national event. It would probably just be a local event, even a winter storm.
To your question also, I think you also may be pointing at something a little different, and that is the domestic event network. And that's
Yes.
what went into place on 9/11, and it's an open bridge telecom that's never been closed. And it's to do immediate response to threats like that.
Yeah. But from a national perspective, the AirMac handles their stuff, and they will deal mainly with terrorist-related incidents, and they work very closely on the SysOps security side. They're very tied in terms of any potential threats which are going on against the aviation system. Any other questions?
I have a comment. And just to share, at a very low level, if I came here and didn't have any idea, I would wonder like what exactly we could talk about with events. I know that Sandy, and just put it from very, very layman's, what I experienced was impressive. We were like a lifeline to the facility, and as the storm was coming up, from what they would report, we're going to have to evacuate this time, they were getting things ready. And so we would have regular intervals of them calling us, and then we would be typing up where they were, who was evacuating, who was estimating, evacuating. Then as the storm passed, once they evacuated, then it was an assessment of how bad were they hit. What do we have, what's on the ground, what can we open, how long is it going to be? So just from very layman's term, that's what I would have known had I not been involved in it. And it was very, as a lifeline,
Right.
I think the facilities appreciate you being, they know you're going to check back in with them, and they were incorporating how many people are on duty,
Yeah.
who they could find, and all that.
The other thing that happens, particularly when there's a good bit of destruction like that, is we work with our tech ops brothers and sisters to prioritize restoration.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of Sandy, because so much was down, we had to prioritize, and that's looking with the command center going to the users. What are you going to be able to do? What kind of equipment are you going to be able to fly in there? What kind of approaches are we going to need? And which direction are they going to be landing? Because all of those things have to be factored in to start saying, okay, we're gonna work on this end of the runway first, or that, you know, so it becomes, we take on a coordination piece for that too. So it's exciting.
Because I don't remember where it was, but I remember when their runways were underwater. And there was
LaGuardia.
no
LaGuardia
restoration.
was completely underwater.
Lake LaGuardia.
Yeah, it's like no restoration in the near future, so
Right.
what else can we do?
Right.
Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, very
Yeah.
exciting.
And even then, they were up and running within 3 days.
Yeah. Tech ops are, those guys are, and girls are incredible at what they do, particularly close to them. That the getting things back up and running. Prioritization is a part of what we do. Hurricane Irene went up New England and up that direction, washed out a bridge. It happened that that bridge had a conduit of cable that ran to one of our en route rag sites, radio sites. They didn't need that rag site today, but they knew, and they communicated back through us, that they needed it in 2 days. There was going to be operations back in that area. In 2 days, they need that rag site. We communicate that with Alan. Alan flies in a SAT thing that at some outrageous amount of money, but by golly, we were running airplanes up there 2 days later, and they didn't even have a rag site 2 days before. So it's that kind of, yeah, it's very tactical, it's very exciting, and it's a whirlwind of activity.
Alan won't be retiring in the near future.
Alan says he's got 2 years. 2 years.
I told him I'm sticking around for 5, but I'm not sticking around if he's sticking around. So, all right, I know we're taking your hours, so anything else quick before we go? Or?
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Good example.